Welcome back to another episode of Your Favorite Podcast. I am Hiba, your resident hater, host, and favorite HR person ever. And this season is inspired by the song Girls Just Want to Have Fun, except I've added an HR twist. Employees just want blank. And today we're filling in the blank with great leaders. And I know that's a tall order, but it's not impossible. And joining me today is the incredible Matt Poepsel. Dr. Matt Poepsel is a leadership expert, author of Expand the Circle, and a self-proclaimed godfather of talent optimization. As the vice president at the Predictive Index, he helps organizations align people strategy with business success. A U.S. Marine Corps veteran and an Ironman triathlete, my God, Matt blends real-world grit with a PhD in psychology and a deep commitment to conscious people-first leadership. He's also the host of Lead the People podcast and a passionate advocate for what he calls enlightened leadership, the kind employees actually want. Matt, welcome.
Hiba, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Did I butcher any part of your intro?
Not at all. Not at all.
You have such an interesting background. First of all, I could never do an Ironman. I'm in awe. Could not do that.
It's like having a part-time job. You know, if you can dedicate the time to it, it works out okay. But yeah, it makes for a really long day, as I found out.
Yeah, you have to swim, right? That's part of the Ironman. It's like swimming, running, biking.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep.
I'm out. I'm going to be very clear. I could do a walk is where I think I would excel.
I was walking by the end. Don't worry about that, Hiba. That's for sure.
The swimming would get me. I mean, I learned to swim growing up, but like I could never. Never. It's not for me. Today's this season's like opener question that I'm asking every guest is very relevant to our topic today. So I'll just go ahead and ask it. What's one truth about work you wish more leaders understood?
I think part of it we understand is that everything's changing so fast. But what I wish leaders understood better is that means that what we call leadership has to evolve too. We're acting like we can still do the things that we've been doing for decades and it would still be relevant. And when the workforce is different and the work format's different, you got to step up, leaders. Come on, you got to get with the times.
Yeah, but it's so hard to get them there. It's so hard. I mean, the amount of conversations I've had with leaders where I'm like, that's not how you lead today. Like your talent will tell you very quickly that's not what they want from you.
It's true.
So this is going to be such a good episode. First of all, we already did an HR therapy. So if you're listening and you missed out on that, I think we have a recording of that somewhere on the internet where you could see us dig into this. But today we're going to take it I think one step deeper and really talk about what is great leadership? How do we help people get there? And what do your leaders need to know? And I want to start with self-awareness because you talk a lot about self-awareness in leaders. We talked about it on our HR therapy together. How can someone actually build that muscle day to day of self-awareness?
Yeah, I've got the good fortune of teaching self-awareness as leadership course at Boston College at the graduate level. So I spend a lot of time thinking and interacting and just getting really rolling around in all the things self-awareness. And I think it begins with intentionality, Hiba. You got to start there. You got to start with that want to. And from there, it really comes down to paying attention. Really, it comes down to that key word of awareness. I find so many times we go through our day, we're on autopilot. We're just reacting to whatever comes in. And then by the time the day's over, you're like, what just happened, right? That's not a way to develop self-awareness. So when I think about it, I break it down in 3 steps. One is you got to make a preview. When you're in the moment, you got to try to get past the me view. And then you got to make the time to conduct a review. So it's like, think about the before, during, and after. Let's say that you got to deliver some bad news to the team. It's going to be sensitive. Maybe a deadline got moved up, or maybe there's another group in your building that was going to be behind on something's going to pinch your team a little bit. So when you make a preview, now we're thinking about, okay, what's the setting going to be like? How are you going to frame it? Are you going to have this virtual? Is it going to be on site? You know your team. How are they going to react, right? Go through it in your mind and make sure that you know the outcome that you want. So that's one form of self-awareness. When we say get beyond the me view, it's not reacting in the moment, not making it sort of like all about you as the team leader. They're going to have a reaction. They're the ones getting impinged in some way. You need to allow them the space to be human and have, go through the feels and all this kind of stuff. And then conducting a review, maybe you're driving home, or maybe it's just later if you're virtual, you're walking around your apartment or whatever it is. And you're thinking, okay, how did it go? What went according to plan? What did I learn? What could I have done better, right? When you go through those types of activities, and especially if you ask for some feedback from some people who are in the room once the dust settles, that's how self-awareness can really be developed in my mind.
Yeah. You must be such a fun professor to have, honestly.
Hey, we do our best.
I mean, you're doing great. Like I'm like enthralled. I'm like, wow, I really need to take this class because I really like the way you set that up. It's really interesting when you encounter somebody who's not self-aware in the workplace, and then you as HR are like trying to give them that awareness. But I always feel like when you try, sometimes people are just like on an edge. Sometimes people don't want to know things about
Oh, yeah.
themselves.
Well, it's scary as hell. And I think during HR therapy, you and I talked about it. Whenever you get surprised by something, what? I had no idea. I didn't know she felt that way. It's like, yeah, guess what? That's because you have no self-awareness.
I love that. Everyone has a leader right now. They're listening to this podcast. Everyone who's listening probably has one leader that they're thinking of when you said that.
Ding,
Who's
ding, ding.
always surprised. They're like, wait, what? My Slack did what? The employees are mad about that now? I'm like, yes.
My 11 p.m. Slack did what?
Yes, they are mad about it right now. Why do you not know this? So, self-awareness is just honestly fascinating and lacking in most of us. Didn't you tell me a stat about like the average person thinks they're more self-aware than they actually are?
Yeah, Tasha Eurich did some research and said that 95% of us believe that we're self-aware, but when tested empirically, only 10 to 15% of us are accurately self-aware. I was like, man, that's a big gap.
That's a huge gap. Okay. Another thing that comes up when it comes to leaders specifically is ego. I hear this all the time. What does it look like when a leader's ego gets in the way of good leadership?
Yeah, I've been there. I'm still there sometimes on a not so great day.
Same.
And for me, the way I like to think about it is like tunnel vision. It's like the walls just kind of close in, the aperture gets really tight. And now all of a sudden my expansiveness, my openness, my innovation, my seeing possibilities, they really kind of go out the window. That's what ego does. And we have to remember ego's job is really to induce fear in us so that it can protect itself. And that's really problematic. And so what it really shows up as is when you feel anxiety, we're like, oh no, what are they going to think about me as the team leader when this happens, the bosses or the team themselves? If you think about rumination, you just can't get over something or any of those sort of negative consequences. Like if you lash out, you mentioned this sometimes, we lash out, or if we act in self-preservation, we throw our own team under the bus. This is all ego rearing its ugly head. If it had a head, it would be ugly. That's kind of how I think about it.
Same. It's so interesting because I feel like we encounter it all the time. And I'm someone who likes to think of herself as having a low ego, but every now and then it does creep up. And I almost like have to mentally check myself. Like I have to be like, hey, whoa, pep talk here. We don't need to be acting like that. Like it's interesting because I think it just shows up so often in the workplace. And I mean, as HR, like we're the ones who are trying to help everyone see these blind spots. And then we're in like this never ending tricky circumstance of like trying to help people, but then also having to be the person to tell them the hard thing, which is like genuinely not fun.
Yeah, well, it's great self-awareness just to recognize that from time to time it does crop up. And I think we're human. It's going to crop up.
Oh, yeah.
But the point about it is that there are times when you could be going along, sailing along, people regard you as a great self-aware manager and all these things. But then if something strikes you just the right way, if it invokes a little bit of fear, a little bit of envy, maybe your college roommate or somebody just put their promotion announcement on LinkedIn and you're wondering, am I on track with my career or am I falling behind? All of a sudden that seeps in there and ego, again, whips up that fear. And all of a sudden now, that's when you start seeing that egoic leadership as opposed to, a more enlightened form.
Love that. We're really tackling like all the things about leaders that are good and not bad, or good and bad. There's something interesting that I think about a lot too is like the word authentic was like the word of the year last year, wasn't it? I think they like named it the word. Everyone wants like an authentic leader. And I think it's so interesting because like when I entered the workplace, it was very much like leaders had to have this like stiff exterior, like they didn't show feelings. They like nothing hurt them and they weren't vulnerable. And then I think we like shifted to like, no, people want authentic leadership. But then there's been this gap sometimes where we almost see a leader who's acting a certain way for optics and one who actually is genuinely people first. And like, how do you spot that difference when you're looking at leadership and like working with leaders?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. A lot of the work on authentic leadership, some of my favorite stuff comes from Bill George. That was like in the 90s. So you're talking, it's been almost 30 years, right? And we're still talking about the importance of being authentic at work. And it was true then, it's true now, we just need it. I like to think about effortlessness. Like when it's easy breezy, right? When it's authentic, you're just your natural self. You've worked on yourself enough that you have the awareness and you're confident enough. You've accepted the parts of yourself that aren't perfect. Let's be honest, we've all got them. If you're me, you've got a lot of those things. But when you're at comfort, at ease with yourself, then I think that's one thing. If somebody looks like they're really trying a lot, then maybe that's not 100% authentic. The other thing I think is when you talk about people-centric leadership and people-first leadership, look at the language. Are we using a lot of we statements when it's appropriate to do that, when we're talking about our collective output and effort and energy? Or is it a lot of I and you statements, that real separation? That's not leadership. That's something else entirely, right? And then the last bit's the behaviors. It's easy to say one thing, but then do something else. Mm-hmm. So if it's authentic, it's got to line up. If you say, we put people first. Yeah, you do. So you got to make sure you back up all the things that you say. Otherwise, people are going to look at it and be like, you might just be saying what you think we want to hear. Yeah, that's not good enough.
No, and that's like how you lose trust too. Like 100%. So quickly people see through that. I feel like even quicker than ever before, because like everything's on the internet. So everyone's putting everything out there and asking everybody for advice. And it's like people will see through exactly your behavior and you'll be called out probably.
It's so overwhelming too when you think about it. There's so much advice and so much, and you could just pile on to this thing where leadership almost becomes impossible. Yes. Well, the reality is if you're a human being and you're good at actually getting people to contribute their energy toward a collective goal, that is leadership. However it's most natural for you, most authentic for you, it can work. You don't have to, there's things you have to learn and study the craft, of course, but you don't have to be overwhelmed by it to the point where you break yourself being like, I can't be all these things. Stop. You don't have to be all those things. You're complete and whole. You just need to get out of your own way.
Oh, this is like the therapy. Every episode, I feel like I bring on guests and I'm always like, this is the therapy I need to be going to. Because there's just like a lot that is hard about leadership. And like, I've been a leader. I think I've been a good one. I think I've been a bad one. And I can definitely tell you like the times and what I've learned from both. And it's just like a never ending journey. Nobody just like wakes up one day and is like, I'm a great leader today. It's like, no, you have to do work to get there.
It's a never ending journey with no roadmap. And you're on the journey and you're on the journey, but you're like, there's no map, no stars, no guidance. Like I'm just making it up as I go. That's a terrible feeling, but it's true.
And it looks so different for each of us. And so like with that, I want to take a minute and kind of talk about your leadership journey. Like, do you have a moment in your leadership journey where you really had to like expand your own circle or really learn something about yourself that you didn't know? Like what happened and what changed?
I can tell you that there was a time when I experienced progress, and sometimes you make a micro inch of progress and you feel like, oh, that's noticeable. And a couple of years ago, I had one of my top performers came to me and he said, Matt, you know how you always say nobody's going to retire from this place? I thought, oh no, I know what's about to happen. He quit. And so it happens. And when he told me about the position he was taking, 100% fit, great opportunity, so happy for him. But a lesser me, an earlier version of me in a leadership role would have immediately gone to that ego mode. Uh-oh, I'm losing a top performer for my team. What are people going to think about me as a leader? I'm the guy that can't keep his people, like all that stuff. But in that moment, I was able to put my me issues aside for a second and recognize that I'm having a sensitive conversation with a human being who I care about a lot. And he's nervous. He's worried. How am I going to react? It's not something he's done in years and years. He's been with me for years. It's not easy to approach me to have this conversation. So immediately my mindset shifted toward when he's having this conversation with his spouse, who I have met and know, later tonight, how do I want him to relay how the conversation went? How do I want him to feel tomorrow morning after this is behind him and now he's going to go through his transition plan? And so I was able to move beyond my own self-interest and my own self-obsession, if you will, and start to think about that person in the moment and how can I show up as a leader? What can I say? What environment can I create? And I saw the level of comfort on his face, the assurance, the warmth in this very private, sort of sensitive moment. And to me, it was just an indication that I handled it a lot differently than I would have when I came from that egoic position, that self-interest position, which absolutely has happened to me in the past. So that's an example of expanding out to think about him first, to think about his family, to think about his next employer, who I don't even know. I'm just like, I want to send this cat into his next role, just so thankful for the opportunity he had with me. Like that didn't used to happen for me, Heba.
Ugh. I mean, I really like that story. It actually made me think of a time where I had the opposite experience with a manager when I came to leave, and it was awful. And I was like already sad about leaving, and I was like, it like I was in tears, like, and it was such an uncomfortable situation for like days afterwards where they were so mad at me for leaving. And I just remember being like, why could you not like be happy and like proud of me that I've like gone on to like take on this new challenge that is going to like I could only have done it because I worked with you, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like such a different experience. And I'm sure in the moment, like, I hope you're still friends with that employee, by the way, because I feel like I would be. Like, I'd be like, sure, I'll check in a few months. It's just.
And I'm sorry that that happened to you, but I'm so glad that you internalized that experience and I can hear the resolve in your voice that you're like, I'm not going to be that person.
Never.
In a way, it kind of those negative experiences and those counter examples, they shape our leadership because we have choices. And for the rest of your career, you will have a choice in that moment to be the person on the receiving end from time to time. Hopefully it's not often, but it does happen. And now you're going to take a more enlightened, a more human approach, because you've been on the other side of that, and said, no, thank you.
Leadership is just it's so fascinating to me. I could probably do a whole season just on this topic, talking about all the various leaders I've worked with, because I always think of like my version of leadership is like, I want my team to be like better and greater than me at everything. Like my goal in life is that when they walk out the door in the end, they're like even better than me. And I think that's possible. And I think that like that makes me a good leader by like helping them and their skills grow to a point where they like almost outgrow me. And so like, why would anyone be upset at someone for leaving? It's like they're taking a piece of everything you've taught them into something else. And like, then your legacy lives on through other people.
I like that. And I can relate to that because it's my happiest moments is when somebody who's, been away from me for a couple of years, but they grew a little bit under my tutelage will come back and say, hey, there was that time you had that conversation. I just want to tell you, I achieved this thing, or I couldn't have done it without you. And you're like, oh man, that's good stuff. That's the good stuff.
I mean, I'm truly like best friends with one of my old direct reports, and we had like some hard times together, and we still reference and joke about like feedback I've given her in the past. It's like still a recurring joke with us. And now we're like more peers and counterparts than anything. And it's like truly wonderful to have somebody that like I've taught things to. She's taught me so much. And now we talk to each other as peers. We've always talked to each other as peers actually, but now we're doing like the same level of work, and it feels really wonderful.
Well, I've gotten a lot more comfortable in my advanced age using a certain 4-letter word at work, and that's love. When you level with somebody with love and you come from that position where I just want you to be better, I want you to know this about yourself, I want to help you get to your next level, like magical things can happen. But when we come and we have to recognize that the ego doesn't do love, the ego only does fear, which is the opposite of love. And so now all of a sudden, when we act from that egoic, that fear base, you can't create from that. You can only destroy from that. So to me, I think this is the evolution of leadership that we really need. And
that was such a fire line, Matt. You can't create from it.
Did you record this?
Yes, I did. Is it
good.
Recorded?
I want a copy.
Do we do this? That was such a good line. Like you can only create, like you're right. Like when people live in fear of like their boss, their environments, like they're creatively stifled as well. And their best work is not going to be done. And I think like part of leadership is you got to like put your shit aside because you want the person in front of you to do their best work.
Right.
And like you have to take a look at yourself and be like, am I stopping that or helping that?
Right.
I mean, and the other thing is like, I think we've also like glamorized leadership quite a bit. People are like, oh, leaders, like they're high paid. They're so excellent. They're going to lead us to a championship. But oftentimes we've glamorized it. What do you think employees actually want from a leader? On like, it's Tuesday. What do they want from a leader at Tuesday at 3 p.m.?
Well, I'll build on your response, and you're right. We've glamorized it to the point where some people don't even consider themselves to be leaders. Oh, I'm not a leader. I'm a manager, but I'm not a leader. Or I'm just an individual contributor. I'm like, bullshit. No, don't let anybody prevent you from seeing yourself as a leader. Right. Let's take a lot of that glamorous stuff out of it. If it makes it sort of foreign to us or alien, or it's like we put leaders on a pedestal. Let's not do that. So I'm with you on that. Let's keep it a little bit more real than that. And I think that to answer the question, it really is an individualized response because on a Tuesday afternoon, for example, people need different things. So the first thing is, I think an employee is saying, I want you to know where I am and what I need right now. Okay. And I don't expect you to be a mind reader. So you can ask me and I'll tell you, right? And I think those are the important things, is that where am I right now? Where am I in terms of my performance, the way that you've equipped me and set me up to succeed? Where am I emotionally from a wellness perspective? How am I absorbing all the wild stuff that's happening around here right now? Whatever it is. And then how can you help me? Like, what is it that I need most from you? And sometimes it's just support. Sometimes it's information. Sometimes resources. It could be a lot of different things. But understanding that everybody on the team is going to have an individualized response to that question, which sounds like it's not very scalable, but guess what? That's your job. And being sure that if you don't know the answer to those questions, just ask. Find a way, create the space to be able to ask and get an honest answer, and then do your level best. You won't be perfect. Do your level best to provide those needs.
Yeah, but like some leaders just don't ask any questions. It like blows my mind. I'm like, when they come to me and they're like, there's the employee and there's a problem. And I'm like, well, did you ask them what's going on?
Yeah.
And their response is always like, no. I'm like,
you're like, why not?
Why do you think leaders are afraid to do like the work?
Because I'm afraid they might tell me.
I'm afraid they might tell me. I'm afraid they might tell me things I don't want to know, honestly. But
it's true. Leadership is a very human business. In my view, it's the most human thing that we can do at work. And that means it's a messy business because that's what it is. That's what the people business is. And so I feel like being willing to ask the questions, being prepared for what's going to come back at you by creating the space and the opportunity for people to be human with you. Yeah, it's not always going to be comfortable, but it doesn't mean it can't be constructive,
Yeah, that's a good point. On the note, you mentioned managers or individual contributors who might not see themselves as leaders, but on the note of managers, if a manager has time to do only one thing, why can I not even ask my question? If a manager only has time to do one thing, what should it be?
To me, I think that it's all about clarifying what winning looks like. I love the term, what does winning look like? Because everybody wants to feel that feeling of winning. And it doesn't mean that we're all hyper competitive. We want, trophies and things. Some people are absolutely like that. And others are just like, no, I want my own localized version of winning. I want to feel like I know I'm doing a good job. I want to be, recognized as having done good work. But so many people are lacking clarity because the manager just either assumes or doesn't actually know or doesn't convey. So I think that if we really started with clarity about what success looks like, and it's also not just the end product of, your job is to, chase down accounts receivable. Okay, great. But connect that to the business itself, because that allows us to get the resources we need to invest in the products and services that help our customers. And as you know, we hear from our customers all the time about how great their lives can be or their businesses can be, because you connect them to the bigger win. It's not just about, in this case, a finance admin action. It's an essential role in the company. So being able to clarify what winning looks like, both for you, for our team, for our organization, but always with that they're the hero of the story under the clarity of what winning looks like. Is that too much to ask, Hiba, for managers to be able to do that?
I mean, I write about the stress that managers are under quite a bit.
True.
I don't think it's a lot to ask. And I think if they were going to do one thing, I always start with set expectations. And that like winning is a part of that. Like, what does success look like in this role?
And I think that, in my opinion, I'm increasingly of the view that senior leaders fail middle managers when we don't clarify what winning looks like in the full context. Meaning that if I say, you got to increase revenue by 20%, but I'm cutting your budget by 15%, if it's an unnatural act, then you haven't really shown someone. That's not clarity. Delusion is not clarity. So even if it's a clear delusion in your mind, it still doesn't count. So I think the clarity of what it looks like in a way that we have the capabilities that match what it is we're trying to accomplish, that's the type of clarity we're talking about. I don't know that the average middle manager is getting it. They're saying like executive expectations are as aggressive as ever, but people have been going through some stuff, as you know better than I. The burnout's high. We've had, so many departures that we haven't backfilled for. People are doing 1.5 jobs in new ways. It's like, how do you think we're going to get all this? But what average manager wants to go and say, are you crazy? Like, that's not going to happen. Like, nobody wants to be that person. So they're in a tough spot, absolutely tough spot.
Oh, God, that's another episode for another day. I could talk about managers till I'm blue in the face. I genuinely feel for anybody. Like, when people are like, what's one thing you wish you could like close your eyes, snap your fingers and change? It would be like how we manage people. And it's like, I just think we set managers up for failure so often.
100%.
And they're a leader. Like a lot of managers are leaders, just like individual.
Totally.
We're all leaders in our organization. That's the other thing too, is like a lot of people look at executives, I think, and are like, those are the leaders. And you said it earlier, like, no, actually, we're all leaders in the workplace.
Yes. Yep. That's where I've landed from my definition. Encouraging others to contribute their energy toward a collective outcome. Like
You're a leader.
all those reasons, all those words I chose very specifically. Encourage, because you can't make anybody do anything. And, Brene Brown taught us that the word courage, right? The heart of that is Latin for heart, cur, right? And so you have to do it with heart, and then inviting them to contribute that energy of theirs, because it's all about energy. How are you going to take the energy that you bring to work to solve work-related problems and to invest in your team and pursue our purpose and all these types of things? And then that collective good means that we're not independently working on these things. We're part of a team. We're part of a collaborative. We all have the same vision in mind. So I feel like from a manager's perspective, that's the demand. And we should absolutely, whether you're an individual contributor, you can be a leader. Absolutely. You manage your projects, but you can lead and influence others around you. So yes, more people I want to identify with leadership at its local level and realize the interconnectedness and the impact we have on one another as we're sending these ripples all over the world of work. It's like, yes, you are absolutely a leader. Please think of yourself like that.
Yes. So do you hear that? If you're listening today, you are a leader. I hope you're one takeaway from this episode.
There's my magic wand.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of takeaways from this episode, but one of them is you are a leader. Just remember that. And I think like managers, leaders, like they're all sometimes interchangeable words, I think. But what's like a small, underappreciated action a leader could take that actually has a huge impact on like team trust?
Because we're talking about trust, which is fundamental in a relationship, I think for the average leader, it really comes down to demonstrating vulnerability, but in an authentic way. Some people are more comfortable with it than others, and we don't have to do a ton of this stuff. But I think that it's really important to make yourself human and to allow yourself to be human in front of your team. I'll give you a quick example. So I've been traveling quite a bit recently, as you do, and came off the road. And I said to my team, I said, I need to recharge. I need to take a beat. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm actually doing a sound therapy session. I've never done it before. There's like 4 gongs, weird stuff happening. I can't wait. I'm so excited. And the conversations, Hibba, that it sparked among my team about work and wellness and techniques, what I've learned, here's what I do, like people just sharing, opening up, like that little bit of me being vulnerable enough to say, I'm not a robot. I've been working really hard. I'm going to take myself offline for a bit, catch a beat. It was just like, it brought down so many walls, right? Yeah. So I think that's a huge part of it. That's something we can definitely do.
Yeah. And you mentioned a lot about how leadership is a relationship. I mean, you were not swiping for it. It's a different one. What are some signs a leader is actually like losing that relationship with their team?
Well, I think that, if the conversation is really very superficial, if it's very transactional in a way, and they're not coming to you with like real problems, or if the work's getting done, but you're not exactly sure how it's getting done. And then, of course, from an HR perspective, there's always metrics on everything from absenteeism, presenteeism, when you think about turnover, if it's showing up in exit interviews. So I think there's a quantitative and a qualitative aspect to it. But when you're losing your team, it's not too late. You can get it back, but we have to recognize that, if you're having a sterile, a flat, kind of a monochrome relationship with your team, not a lot of depth there, that's a pretty good sign that something's slipping away.
It feels forced. Yeah. There's like one example that comes to mind. I'm loving these examples today. I once worked in an HR department where the leader, the CHRO, was a man, and the majority of the HR department, women. Like that's just naturally, HR is like 70% women. And we were doing like our summer event, and he decided he wanted all of us to go to a baseball game. And I was like, nothing against sports. I love sports. Like, to be very clear, basketball is my favorite sport. I love football. Like, I would go to it in a heartbeat. Baseball, not so much, because it's like in the summer and you're usually like really hot in DC. But I thought it was really interesting because I remember asking like multiple people on the team, did you want to go to a baseball game? And all of them were like, no, I hate baseball. Like, there wasn't a single person. I think maybe there's like 1 or 2 people out of like 18 people on this team that liked baseball. Right. And I remember in the moment just being like, the thought is there, like, let's do something as a team. but the action is completely dissociated from what we all actually want as a team.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you not know us? There are 18 of us. You couldn't ask us if we wanted to go to this. So like now we're spending company resources and this is like our one engagement event of the quarter. And we're all doing something none of us actually would have ever chosen to do.
Good news, team. I've gone off by myself and decided what we're all going to spend the next several hours doing. You're like, what just happened?
I honestly was just like, I don't know if this is just because he loves baseball and now we're all going, but we're a team of like 18 people, mostly women, who none of us would, I think, list baseball as their top favorite thing to do in the summer in DC where it's boiling hot in the middle of a workday. Like, I was like, I would have done anything else. Like, I would have virtually anything else you could have convinced me to do, I would have done than go to a baseball game. And I use that reference in my head so often when I'm thinking of things because I'm always like, my team doesn't have to do the things I want to do. I need to understand what it is that they like. Like my relationship with them is like, I need to know what they like. I need to know what I like. And then we need to find some like happy middle ground that makes us both feel seen and heard.
It's the huge paradox of leadership. And that is this. It's not about you. It's about the mission and it's about the other people in your charge. And so in that case, the mission was, let's get to know each other. Let's have some quality time away from work. Let's have some low stress hangout time. Okay, great. And then, when it's about the other people, it's like, they don't want to go to baseball. Like, it's not that hard. And so there's lots of ways to accomplish the mission in a way that the collective is really more interested in. But again, that's ask and listen, ask the question as a leader and then shut your mouth and listen.
Yeah, the relationship piece is so valuable. But the other part that I personally have struggled with as a leader is like that line between open and oversharing, because I think I'm a very open person.
Yeah.
And I think like oversharing can happen, not with me particularly anymore, but like it's easy to blur the line between open and oversharing. And like you were talking about vulnerability earlier, like what role does vulnerability play in like that line between helping us understand open versus oversharing?
Yeah, I think that perfectionism is a problem because if we make it seem like we're not vulnerable at all, that's no good. But you're right that we can, swing too far to the other side. That's not good either. So the one thing I'd say is you got to stay true to yourself, right? You have to find your own way of expressing that vulnerability. Like in my case, I shared an early example where I just came out and told my team. That was fine for me. It doesn't mean that's the right, technique for everybody. But the other thing is I like to think of it like a thermostat. You should just be a little uncomfortable because you're the one making yourself vulnerable, right? Not excessively uncomfortable. You've gone too far. And they should be at room temperature. You have to find ways of sharing things. I didn't go on and on about my stress in a way that people are like, is this guy okay? Like he's been traveling a lot. We knew that, but oh my gosh, do we need to have an intervention? Like that would have been no good. So it's like, how do you keep them nice and comfortable at room temperature? And then you're just slightly uncomfortable. That's the thermostat setting I would like to pick if I could.
Oh, I really like that. That's like a good analogy for like the line between open and oversharing. And I just like always think about oversharing. Like if you're going to put somebody in like exactly what I said, an uncomfortable position, you probably shouldn't just say it. You just probably
100%. Yeah. But most managers and people that don't have that leadership experience are hesitant to make themselves uncomfortable because who wants to be uncomfortable? I get it. But when you realize that leadership is about self-sacrifice and it's about the greater collective, then you become more willing to at least set the thermostat a little bit higher. Again, we don't want you to break yourself, but I think it's okay to be a little uncomfortable every once in a while. It gets easier with practice and with time. So
yeah. I love that thermostat analogy. I'm going to be thinking about that later today. I want to take like a macro view. I always like to end every episode, sometimes like futuristic, sometimes macro, but I want to end on like kind of macro, also future. We're living in this era of burnout, layoffs, AI. What does modern leadership need to look like to actually navigate all of this?
Yeah, and toward the end of my book, I had taken a lot of inspiration from my meditation practice, and I really find that for a variety of different reasons, it really seems well suited for what we're navigating into right now. And I kind of gave a simple equation. If you think about the things we want more of, the top of the line, so to speak, I call it mindfulness. So how do we have awareness? How do we make sure that we're, have that mindful approach? compassion, because people are going through some things. People are burned out. People are uncertain. They're scared. And then also wisdom, understanding the natural cycle of things. So right now, for example, if you find that it's an employer side market and we can really squeeze our people and force them back to the office, or, just really just grind them to bits, well, guess what? These things are cyclic. Eventually, the employees will have the power again, and they'll have long memories. So the wisdom to understand the nature of things, I think, is really important. That's all above the line. So how do we drive up mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom? But then below the line, it's self-interest. How do we make sure that our self-interest, it may not be zero, but we want it to be as small as possible? Make sure that my basic needs are met as a leader, but try to make sure that that is as small as I can if I want the outcome, in this case, the enlightened leadership impact, to be as high as possible. So that's kind of some of the key components. I think we just have to hold those in check. As soon as self-interest starts to work like a runaway train and ego takes over, and now I'm really worried about all the things me, it destroys value in organizations completely. And if I move without mindfulness and it's just kind of autopilot, or if I move without compassion and I burn through people to get to my results, no good.
It's never going to work. Yeah. Modern leadership is fascinating to me. And you write a lot about the future of work. Like, you wrote a book, but like, what is one leadership behavior you think could become obsolete or is about to become obsolete?
It's probably considered a management behavior, but what about status reports? Like, how much time do managers and, we'll call it level down leaders spend just preparing, here's where we're at with this thing, and talking to more senior people? So it's like all this wasted energy about where are we at with this thing, this project, this initiative, the budget, the blah, blah, blah. It takes all this time because you're saying to individual contributors, well, you can't talk to the C-suite. You've got to roll this up and roll this up and roll this up so that everyone can control their ego at every level, protect, all the way up. And then senior leadership is like, well, things seem to be going pretty well here. And the answer is, no, it's not. It's gone terribly, but nobody wants to tell you the truth. But eventually, I think AI can cut through a lot of that, the different types of automation. And all of a sudden, it's like, I shouldn't have to ask where we're at. I should just be able to see myself. So I think a lot of that leadership protection and status updating, I certainly hope that a lot of that goes away.
That's so funny. We do those status updates like once a week to our entire department leaders team. So I'm very intrigued about that. I like it. My version of it is less status check-in. It's more like my coworker and I do this like checklist where it's like, let's just run through the 5 or 10 things that you and I both need to remember to do in the next 48 hours. And then we'll just like Slack them back and forth to each other and kind of do that. Nice. But you're right. Like a status report, I never ask her, like, I know if I assign her a task, she's going to do it.
Yeah.
I never am like, what's the status? Write me an update on it. Like, that's not my style of management.
How much time do you think in the average corporation goes into shaping messaging impression? We're actually a little behind, but I want to position it in a way that it doesn't come back and blow back on me. Like, oh my gosh, all these wasted cycles, right? And that takes up all that time that now we're not spending on the people part.
Yeah.
Which only exacerbates the performance issues. It's like, stop, you got to step off the wheel. Come on.
Oh, that's so interesting. I could do a whole episode on that too. I'm going to be thinking about this for a while.
We got a lot of episodes.
We got a lot of episodes to do together, Matt, because I'm just like, there are 6 other things I want to talk to you about. This like status report thing. I'm like, I watch people, we like just spend hours of their day doing this. And I'm like, you could have spent that time, like, again, like we said, talking to your team, helping them solve a tricky problem, like investing your time in your development, their development. Like, do you really need to be typing all of that in an email to prove to everybody else you're doing work?
Correct. And what you find is that it's this never ending thing, because now when you don't spend the time, then people are a little rubbed raw, and then they have, conflict on the team, and then the work doesn't get done the right way, and you have to put out fires all day long. Well, where do you think the fires are coming from? When you're in the fire business, that's what happens.
Yeah. Someone who listens to this podcast regularly has probably heard me critique CEOs quite a bit. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I think a lot of CEOs fall into leadership because they were the really good ideas people, and then they became the CEOs of the company. And I think like it's the hardest, I would say second hardest job out there, because like I'm biased. I think HR is the hardest job out there, but I have a ton of empathy for CEOs, but also I do tend to criticize them more than I probably should. So if you're a CEO listening to this, I see you. But what is something you wish every CEO understood about the people in the company?
I think one of the things that really has dawned on me is that if you're a CEO, your last 20 years of experience looks nothing like what the next 20 years are going to look like for the people who work for you. Oof. And I think we have very sort of recency bias, or whatever the right term is, about, well, if they don't do the things I did, how will they get to where I am? And you're like, there's nothing that is relevant from your 20 years ago that you did when you're talking about your individual contributors. Like, their world is entirely different. Think about the AI world, the remote work, the possibilities, the job markets, everything. It's all different. And so I think that having a little bit of a shift from how do I see things through my own worldview, and more about, like, what are they experiencing at this stage of their career? And I think recognizing for the CEO, it's my job to make sure they can do the job I need them to do today, but also that I'm equipping them to navigate their next 20 years. Maybe not all of it, but certainly the next phase of that. Yeah. And I think that's a really important mindset shift versus saying, like, well, I only know how I did it, and so that's what I expect everybody to do. You're like, wait a second, 20 years ago, we had MapQuest. We didn't have GPS. Do you expect people to go back and print out their directions? Like, no, of course not. It's ridiculous.
No, that's such a good point. I also miss MapQuest. We were big MapQuest printers over here. Got lost a lot, though. It's such a good point. Like, yeah, what's that saying? Like, what got us here won't get us there.
And it's easy to say, and it's hard to change your leadership style, the way you have incentives, the way you stop promoting jackasses, like all the things that it takes to actually make good on that revelation. That's the hard part, right? So saying that's one thing, but actually changing your approach to leadership, recognizing that today's workers want flexibility and autonomy. They want to have a voice. They want to have all the things that didn't particularly appeal to, Gen X like myself 20 years ago. But guess what? It's their time. Like, how do we make sure that their needs and their expectations are met now? If I want to have, the opportunity to complain about them, I got to make sure they stay. Otherwise, who am I going to complain about?
Yeah, they're going to be, millennials and Gen Z are going to be the majority of the workforce.
Yeah, it won't take long.
Yeah, we're almost there. I feel like it's
almost there, turning the corner.
Yeah, so you can't do that. You say all of this, and I think about Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and how he wants everyone back in the office because they built that really expensive, beautiful office building. And then I just look at him sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, okay, you've reached whatever tier of whatever level you've ever wanted to reach, but the average person working day to day is having such a different experience than you. And I just feel like he thinks that everyone should be in the office because he wants to be in the office.
Yeah, and return to office may make sense for a given organization. Like, if you're a construction worker, guess what? You're going to the office because that's where the work happens. But it doesn't mean that when it comes from a place of, well, I spent a bunch of money on a lease, or I'm just more comfortable with people, or I don't trust people if I can't see them. Those are all me issues. Again, that's all ego, as opposed to, let's make a thoughtful decision here, which again, may be, let's all return to office because that's how we can do our best work. Yeah. And if we need you to find a different, work format, then, we'll work with you on that. But many times I think a lot of it's just coming from, well, that's not how we used to do it. So I need my people where I can see them. And you're like, oh boy, this is not going to last.
It's not the kind of leader I want to work with. Right. Okay. My last question for this episode, it's a juicy one. If you could rewrite the playbook on how companies develop leaders, what's one chapter that needs to go and one chapter that has to be added?
I think there's this self-made myth going on out there that leaders are somehow divine. They just work privately and all of a sudden they emerge as great leaders. And it's just not true at all. So let's get rid of that chapter that says you have to go it alone. You have to suffer in silence. You just have to figure it out and don't talk to anybody and admit that you don't know how to do that part of your job because guess what? Everybody had to learn somehow. So we're all in this together. And I think that more mentorship could come out of that. Let's tear that chapter out of there. We don't need that. I would add a chapter on gardening is what I would do, Hiba. Because there's an old saying in the Buddhist tradition, at least, and it says, every seed bears its fruit. And I think that that's so true in what's happening today. And we have to ask ourselves, what seeds are we planting? If we plant seeds of mistrust and we say, you got to return to office because I think if you're at home, you're going to fold your laundry on a Zoom call. You're like, okay, you're going to plant those seeds. It will bear its fruit. And so I think that the simple gardening analogy is one that we could really start to think about and say, what is it that we're trying to create in terms of the work experience, the nature of performance? How do we make sure people are experiencing purpose? Those are the kinds of seeds I'd prefer to see us planting. And I think a lot of times we're planting all these seeds, not really thinking about, guess what? Inevitably, these things will bear their fruit. And it's not always going to be the fruit we want.
Definitely not. Okay, chapter on gardening. I love that.
And green thumb, who knew?
I love that analogy. I'm not a plant person. This is actually a long-running joke with all of my friends that I don't do plants. I like the wilderness, but I'm not like a house plant person.
Right.
It doesn't bring me joy. But
I'm there with you 100%. My father ran a garden center, knows every plant, could take care of any plant. I am exactly the opposite.
You're like, it's not for me.
I can kill any plant. Yeah, just give me a plant. I can neglect any plant that you give me. That's my gift.
My plants are my books, honestly. Those are the things that
I like
books, all my books. They're the things I'm growing in life. My collection is never ending. I forgot that you studied Buddhism, right? Isn't that you? You are such an interesting person, honestly. Your background is fascinating.
Appreciate
You
that.
lived so many lives, I feel like, and you probably have learned a lot. I feel like you've learned a lot. Just you get to teach.
100%. Yeah, that's what happened to me when I fell out of love with work and out of love with myself, and ended up finding that meditation path was a way that brought me back, and it really kind of reinvigorated and took me from that monochrome state to a full Technicolor. And I saw so many parallels between Western psychology that I had studied in terms of leadership and coaching and the future of work, and it just kind of made this beautiful gumbo soup kind of stew of let's mix in some of that Eastern philosophy with our Western leadership styles. And I think it's a very fruitful area of study and practice. So I feel blessed to have kind of gotten to this point, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Oh, I feel really blessed that I get to know you and I get to record podcasts with you. Thank you for being here today. I'm really honored. I've always admired you, and I feel like we have such good conversations when we're chatting with each other, and I take something away every single time. So thank you for making time for me today. For everyone who's listening and they want to get to know you and reach out to you, what's the best way they can do that?
LinkedIn is fabulous. If you got a link to the LinkedIn is awesome. And then my website, mattpoepsel.com.
You can learn a lot about Matt on that website, as I did, because I already knew a lot of it. But then I read your website and I was like, holy cow, he's way cooler now. I had no idea. I am just so thankful you were here today. Thank you, Matt. This was so fun. I think you'll definitely be back. We have way more to talk about, honestly. And just thank you.
I love all of our conversations, Hiba. Thanks for having me.
Of course.